Welcome, Dr. Spiegel. I'm so excited to jump into everything that you've written about on gravity and how it impacts our body. Very fascinating, and I'm so glad you're here.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
Um, so I always am curious what makes somebody want to write a book? How did you come to your work? So it's Pull, How Gravity Shapes Your Body, Steadies the Mind, and Guides Our Health. Can you take us into what made you want to write this book? And I guess maybe take a step back. And more importantly, how did you come into this work?
Right. Well, I'm a doctor and I'm a professor of medicine and public health and an academic, and I'm a gastroenterologist too. But I don't sit around spending a lot of time thinking about gravity. I'll tell you that, despite having written this book, at least not before I wrote this book. This all started because my mother-in-law had developed cognitive decline, and she was in an assisted living facility.
Mm.
And she spent a lot of time lying flat in bed. And right about the time she started lying flat, she started getting abdominal issues, bloating, stomach aches, slow digestion, and depression.
Oh, wow.
And my family asked me what's going on. And I started thinking about it. And I thought, well, we're not designed to lie flat all day. We're not. We're supposed to be upright and be moving and literally standing up and fighting gravity itself. That's what we're designed to do. And I started thinking about what happens in the GI system, which is my area, and how if you're lying flat all day, it sort of pancakes on itself and becomes stagnant. And we see this in the hospital too. So long story short, I ended up writing a paper about gravity and the gut, and that was the
Mm.
title of it. And it got worldwide media attention. People were really interested in this idea of your relationship to gravity and how it affects your health. Then I realized this is a much bigger story. It's not just about the gut, it's about every part of your body, every sinew, every cell, every organ, every tendon is managing this fundamental force from the day you're conceived to the day you
Yes.
pass and are pulled back down by gravity itself. So that's what this book is about.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And you're pioneering in a space where you even mention in the book, you're putting work out there, like you said, that's never been discussed or thought about in this way. We've never thought about our health in terms of how gravity's impacting it.
Mm.
And I found that really fascinating. And that's why I enjoyed reading it so much. And I was telling you before we hit record, there was something sort of poetic because you were connecting it to not just all aspects of our physiology and our health and our mental health, but our connection to everything around us, the whole universe and the system that
Yeah.
we're a part of, and how gravity is a part of this planet, and we are designed to be living this way.
Yeah. I liken it to a fish in water in the book. A
Hmm.
fish is designed to survive and thrive through this aqueous world of water that it lives in. I doubt the fish thinks about the water, even knows it's in water, doesn't know any different. It's not really a gravitational world as much as a buoyant, floaty world that it survives in and thrives in. And that's like us to gravity. We are surrounded by and our life is determined by this fundamental force of physics, and we're designed to move through it. And the
Yes.
better you move through it, the stronger you are, the longer you stand up and stay up and thrive, the better your life becomes. And really that's what this book is all about, is really digging deep into what does that mean? We are on this planet that is pulling us down, and we emerged from it. Our body is like a sense-making machine. It is taking in all the data of the physical planet and compressing it like a computer compresses data into a narrative that informs your mind about your life and your relationship to this planet itself. And that's ultimately what this book is about.
Yeah, it's amazing. And you want it for the masses, right? This is something you're introducing not just to your peers in the medical community, but for everyone to really understand. And I went to bed last night thinking about gravity for the first time. Like you just don't, like you said, we don't think about it. We're just part of this world and the system, and it anchors us down, right? And if we trip, we're going to fall because gravity's going to pull us down. But when I was lying down last night before bed, I was thinking about everything I had written in the book. And when I was preparing for the interview, I found myself wanting to stand up versus sitting to read because of what I read in the book. So, but tell us, you want this for everyone, right?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. You just said you were lying down in bed. I mean, just think about that language for a moment. You were lying
Yes.
down. We sleep flat.
Yes.
Why do we sleep flat and not sleep upright? Well, in part because our muscles are asleep too, but long before we were sleeping flat, we were up in trees and we were upright. And it turns out there's some theories that when we finally went from trees to the ground, our ancestors, that's when human intelligence exploded. And it may be in part that when we lie flat, you are literally reperfusing your brain at night with oxygenated blood. Because all day long, if you don't have enough fluid and liquid in your body, and those pumps and tubes aren't moving the hydraulics up and down well enough, the brain is the last part to get perfused, way up as farthest away from the ground as possible. And when you lie down in bed, you get this oxygenated flow of blood, and it like reboots your brain. It moves out amyloid and all these toxins and issues. And that may literally be part of sleeping, is managing gravity over the course of the evening.
And we never think about that.
That's right. Yeah,
But it's by design. For whatever reason, it's by design. It's
that's
how
right.
we're intended to be. But we take it for granted. We don't think about it. It was interesting. In the first chapter, you talked about the
Muscular.
musculoskeletal system and about the Alexander technique, which is something I became introduced to in my
Mm,
20s, taking continuing education courses in Boston.
mm,
And this woman walked in, and I just have a lot of curiosity. And she was so aligned, and her neck was long, and she was so tall.
yes.
And I only did one session with her, but I wore a back brace for scoliosis. I still have a moderate
Mm,
curve, and I
mm.
thought, gosh, I would love to be able to be so elongated and sort of aligned. But can you tell my audience what this is, how you discovered it, and how it also sort of led you on this path of pursuing more about your theory and now something that's in practice on, the impact of gravity on our health?
That's such a great place to start. And you mentioned scoliosis, and the back itself is an anti-gravity chassis, right? When we went from four-legged creatures to two-legged, we moved our entire body in a completely different orientation. And so the spine and the musculoskeletal system in general has a very narrow center of gravity, which means you
Mhm.
need to be aligned with the pull of the planet to optimize not just your muscle and bones, but all of the viscera dangling inside. It's like we have this sack of potatoes in our belly that we hoist around our entire life. And it turns out it's almost like ornaments hanging off of a Christmas tree. Like these systems are dangling down from us. And if you stand up straight and you open up your abdomen and you raise your diaphragm up and you have
Mhm.
strong back muscles, your intestinal system also is pulled up and is more able to work and to move. And this can even affect the microbiome inside of your gut. So, what the Alexander technique is really about is understanding this chain reaction from the position of your physical body in space to what's happening on the inside, physically, and as we'll discuss, even mentally. And so Frederick Alexander was a stage actor in Australia who was losing his voice on stage. And he could not figure out what was going on, and his livelihood was being threatened. And after a whole series of careful investigations, he realized it had to do with his feet, which is wild. That's the other side of the body. And his feet were curled up and tense, and his legs were curled up and tense, and his body and every part of his mechanism was tense and misaligned with the pull of gravity. And he eventually traced it all the way back to his throat. And when he rearranged his body, his voice came back, and he describes that. And since then, opera singers and world-class athletes follow this Alexander technique. And yeah, it's about gravity management.
It's amazing. And do you find, it's wonderful that there's specialties. You said you're a gastroenterologist by training. And so when you have an issue, you go to the specialist because you want to get the best care you can. But it seems that what you're talking about is going to help shift maybe how we approach helping somebody with issues so that it aligns like how everything's connected versus seeing it in silos. Is that
Right.
is that accurate?
Yeah, so I call this biogravitational medicine. And The idea is, normally when you see a doctor, they focus on their organ. There's the heart and there's the gut. That's what I focus on. And somebody else will look at the back and somebody else will look at the nervous system. But through the lens of gravity, we start to see medicine very differently. Physics came first, biology came second. That's the order. And psychology came after that. So if we go down to the fundamental basics of how we're literally shaped and how we move, we start to realize it's not just one organ. They're all interconnected. There are seams holding it together and zipping it together into one holistic mechanism. And when we think about it as gravity intolerance, now we can start to really change how we think about disorders, how we manage them, how we discuss them, and how we collaborate across specialists to think more broadly about human health and well-being. And that's really what this book focuses on as you get towards the latter half of it, is this vision of a biogravitational medicine clinic and what that would look like and what the therapies would be like if we thought a little bit differently about medicine.
Okay, this is so good. And so in the book, I found it interesting. So you talked about how you're a runner, and so you wore the
Hmm.
Vibram five-finger minimalist shoes. I've seen those.
Yeah,
So why did you shift to that? And how has it actually helped you?
right. So it goes back to the Alexander technique. And
Right.
so as Alexander discussed, and I mentioned earlier, it all begins with the feet. So this is our point of contact with Mother Earth. It's the feet. And it's 5% of your body's surface area, but it holds 100% of our weight, all concentrated onto this one spot. And if you have extra weight that you're carrying around, that just puts even more pressure. And then people get plantar fasciitis and all sorts of foot issues. That's gravity intolerance. We need to
Mm.
think of our feet as gravity management surfaces. And they're beautifully engineered. And we can get into all those details about exactly how the foot works. But it turns out running in so-called barefoot shoes is extremely powerful way to strengthen that point of contact. And it turns out gravity isn't so much a pull down, it's actually just as much a push up.
Mm.
That's actually what relativity is about. They're relatively the same. Pull down, push up are the same. And if you think about the earth as pushing up into you,
Mm.
then it's like a trampoline effect. It's a buoyant effect that we can leverage to push ourselves and propel ourselves up into the world. And barefoot running allows you to do that. Now, there are side effects, to be clear, and be
Okay.
careful, and you got to
Yes.
work up into it. But I run marathons in those shoes.
You do.
Oh, yeah. I've run at least 10 marathons just in those shoes alone. Yeah.
Does it feel good? Because when you walk barefoot,
Hmm.
even in you're on the grass, even in cement or on the beach, there's something about that that just feels good.
It's grounded, and you're
Yes.
honoring that point of contact with the world. And you're building the foot so that it shapes around the earth in your unique way, like a fingerprint. Whereas if you surround your foot in padding and big, thick shoes and maybe Hokas, for example, you basically encased your foot in a pillow system that no longer allows the foot to uniquely adapt to the ground in your own special way. Whereas when you wear those shoes, you get these thick ropes that start to form in the middle of the foot, and you get this like this strength in the foot itself. And I shaved 20 minutes off my marathon time
Wow.
just by getting that extra strength from the lower leg and the foot itself. And that's how our ancestors, ran and moved as well.
It's true. And we've adapted to our modern lifestyles and do whatever feels comfortable, right? And probably a lot of us have back pain, so we get
Yeah.
as much cushioning as possible. Any tips you can give us? I mean, especially like I'm thinking, here I am does that mean if I have scoliosis, does that
Mhm.
mean that I have, what did you use the word before? And like in gravity intolerance?
Gravity
Is
intolerance.
mine heightened or no,
So
not
yeah, so
necessarily?
back pain in general is
Yeah.
the world's most common form of gravity intolerance. And that's what it is. You have this sack of potatoes in the belly that you're supporting. It is on a suspension system called the mesentery, which are basically like suspension cables. And that system, essentially of like cables and ropes, you can think of it, ties into the mid lumbar spine. So it's very common to see people with irritable bowel syndrome, for example, also have back pain. In many cases, also have elevated body mass and obesity. And the combination of all those factors are forms of gravity intolerance that causes this compression of the abdominal cavity. And then you get stagnation and bacterial overgrowth and gas formation. And so that's just a sequence of events, but it comes back to the weakness of the back itself. So strengthening the back, the anti-gravity extensor muscles along the back, doing planks, abdominal workouts, and something called hypopressive exercises are really effective. And this is where you suck your belly in. You can almost try it. You suck your belly in and hold it like you're pulling that sack of potatoes up into your chest almost, and then relax. And then breathe and do it again. And what you're doing is not only working out the anterior abs like you would with a sit-up, but you're working out the diaphragm and really strengthening the cords and connections within the belly. And there's evidence that this can help with abdominal pain, back pain, and pelvic pain.
Okay, this is good. And in your office, you stand on what? Tell my audience. You were showing me
Yeah.
your setup in your office to tell us some of the things you've been doing for the musculoskeletal system.
Yeah, so I do a few things. I have a standing desk. So
Yes.
there's this saying that sitting is the new smoking. And that's from James Levine at the Mayo Clinic, who said that. And although honestly, smoking's worse than sitting, neither is good. And we are not designed to sit down, hunched over in front of computer screens. I think we all know that.
Yeah.
You know, where I'm standing right now and where you're sitting right now, 200 years ago, just think about it. There were no buildings. We didn't have fluorescent lights. This was chaparral, and there were farmers out there working their butts off just to survive. 200 years later, we're surrounded by fluorescent lights, by drywall, computer screens. We're sitting in chairs. We're hunched over. We're literally giving in to gravity. Our ancestors fought gravity, and they were stronger
Yes.
and lighter. And they would have lived longer if it weren't for, modern medicine and antibiotics and, all the things that we now have managed to survive through. But we now are going in reverse by giving in to gravity. So, what I do then is I have a standing desk and I have a balance board, a wobble board, which is constantly keeping me the proprioception, which is the nervous system's ability to know where it is in space, and the inner ears. So in your inner ear, you have these gyroscopes that are keeping track of where you are in relation to gravity. It's literally aligning you with the Earth's pole. And if the inner ear gets thrown off, boy, bad things happen. People get anxious. Sometimes people are anxious. They don't know why. It's because they are losing track of gravity because their inner ear is thrown off. I also use a stair stepper, and I use a weighted vest, 20-pound weighted vest, and 20-pound ankle weights on both of my ankles. And it actually caused me to lose weight. I did this experiment for the book, and I talk about what happened. And I got stronger and a little lighter just from weighing myself down with this whole crazy setup I have here.
So weighted vests have become very popular for midlife women. There's a lot of doctors out there saying, you should be doing it to build strong muscles and bones. Do you agree with that? I mean, you're obviously doing it, but what was your experiment trying to prove? Like, why did you do that for the
So
book?
the idea I had was, how a baseball player will put a weighted donut around the bat when they're warming up, and then
Yeah.
they take the weight off and they go up to home plate and they feel stronger and faster because they've been practicing with this heavier bat. So I thought, well, what if I were to simulate life on a bigger planet with more pull and stand up to it? Would that make me stronger when I take off the weights? Would I feel lighter physically and mentally? And that's what I wanted to experiment with. And I ended up learning that it works for a particular reason. There's something called the gravitastat,
Okay.
which it's almost like a thermostat for gravity in the body. It's called the gravitastat. And basically the idea is if you were to weigh yourself down all of a sudden, not slowly and progressively over months and years, but all of a sudden, your bones would feel this extra pressure. And they're saying to themselves, what happened here? Like gravity just got stronger. So they send signals to the brain to increase metabolic activity. We're going to have to get lighter. And it turns out that this system can lead to weight loss, which is why these weighted vests are very popular now. There's research that shows you can lose up to 4 pounds in about 4 weeks just by wearing, not even exercising in these vests, but just wearing them around the house. And if you exercise in them, this is something called a rucking, which is a technique from the military originally where you wear a weighted backpack. It just puts extra pressure on your body, and it helps also reduce osteoporosis, leads to stronger bones, which is why astronauts who have no gravity get very thin bones very fast because they have the opposite problem. There's no tension, no pressure on those bones. So they get thin bones very quickly in space.
How long are you wearing that vest? And you have weighted ankle weights too. So
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
really weighing yourself down.
So I started doing it when I was writing this book, and I've been doing it ever since. I'm not doing it this very moment,
Yeah.
but I have the setup right here. So after this is over, I'll put it on. Just looks a little weird to have a tactical vest, under your jacket. I've had a few people look at me kind of funny with that vest on, by the way. But when I first started doing it, within the first day, I was exhausted. I even had some heart palpitations. So, talk to a doctor if you have any heart issues or you're concerned about this. And start low and go slow. But after the first week, I was hardly even thinking about it. And about 2 or 3 weeks in, I just wear it the entire day. Even sometimes when I'm seeing patients, I'll have it underneath my coat. And I'm kind of thinking we need like a clothing line with some weights kind of sewn into the clothing just to keep you, down a little bit. So anyway, that's the idea behind this, what I called Operation Gravitate in the book.
I love it. I love it. And actually, my husband's been doing the standing desk for like 15 years.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he's traveling now and he'll take a ironing board. He just never sits.
Yeah.
And I would say to him, "Oh, I don't know if I could do that." But after reading your book, I'm like, I'm going to try that.
Very doable. I've been standing at a standing desk for about 10 years, and I just don't know any different now. I noticed that once you get over the sort of discomfort of standing, you realize you're actually much more productive, much more engaged, physically and mentally by standing all day. You're just literally pumping blood more efficiently. You're contracting the calf muscles in your legs, which is milking the anti-gravity effects of the veins back up into your heart, and everything's just moving better when you're up and moving.
Yeah, and you're more aware of your posture. I was noticing that yesterday. I'm like, let me try this. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm gonna pull my shoulders
That's
down. Like
yeah,
I'm
the
gonna,
pulling the shoulders back a little bit. So
yeah.
the weighted vest, if you don't use it properly, it can kind of like get overtaken by it and slump forward, and you don't want that. Instead, you want to be able to stand up and almost like pull your shoulders back a little bit. So the space between the scapula and the back, the upper back, gets much stronger. And when you have a stronger upper back, you naturally sit up more and your thorax or rib cage moves up. And then that has a chain reaction. The diaphragm moves up. Then there's something called the falciform ligament, which is anatomically this connection between the diaphragm and the liver. And the liver moves up. And the next thing you know, this mesentery and all those cables that I talked about earlier are moving up. The sack of potatoes moves up. Everything moves up. It's all one chain reaction, which brings us back to that Alexander technique.
It's amazing. Okay. So in the chapter 2, when you were talking about circulation and heart, you talked about strokes. And
Mm.
I feel like if there's, with everything we're talking about, this is going to land, I think, and I want every person to hear this because there was data. So you cite research showing stroke recovery outcomes can be influenced by body position too, whether you're taken out lying down or upright. So can you talk about this? Because I was like, I want everyone I know to know this information.
Yeah, when I learned about this, I was so fascinated by it. And it turns out that when I told my colleagues about my interest in gravity and that I was writing this book, I started to get tips from my colleagues. They would say, hey, did you know about this? Have you seen that? And so it was actually one of my colleagues that sent me this literature about stroke and position. And it turns out there's research from the University of Tennessee, as I recall, where they took people who were having symptoms of an acute stroke. So this means you suddenly can't feel, you suddenly can't move in a particular part of your body. Often it's one side of the body, having difficulty speaking all of a sudden. There's some deficit. So if you feel tingling, that's typically not a stroke. That's a positive symptom. This would be a negative symptom. You can't feel, you can't speak, you can't move. And of course, you're going to call 911 and you need to get to the hospital. Well, it turns out in this study, they divided people up into two groups. While they're on their way to the hospital, they either had them sitting up in the gurney, like they usually do, or lie down flat. It turns out the people who lie down flat had much better outcomes. I mean, remarkably better neurological recovery, upwards of 40% better neurological recovery if they were flat. And the idea was that if you have a blockage in your brain, because there's a clot up in there, then if you're lying flat, you can help reperfuse the rest of the brain. Now, it's complicated because there are a few different kinds of strokes, but in general, you don't know what kind of stroke you have until you get to the hospital. And so lying flat in this study showed much better clinical outcomes. So it's a very important and interesting finding.
I found it really interesting. I was like, okay, I really want to mention that on the show. You write at UCLA, my research focused on unraveling the complexities of IBS,
Hmm.
the leading cause of gastrointestinal discomfort worldwide. And I'm curious, what did you come to learn about the gut-brain connection and the role of gravity? Because especially with your work, and you mentioned I forget if her name was Sandra, the client that
Hmm.
the patient that you referenced,
Hmm.
who had the POTS.
Yeah,
Tell us what you learned about this connection, because again, now we're integrating the whole body. We're not saying, oh, you've got
right.
IBS, go see your gastroenterologist and you're done.
Yeah, so in our field, we call IBS a disorder of gut-brain interaction. It's a DGBI, disorder of gut-brain interaction. And so what does that mean exactly? Well, we know the brain and the gut are connected. They're connected through the nervous system. They're connected neurohormonally. And we know that the gut microbiome, these trillions of organisms that we have in our body, has a big role to play in handing off the signals between the brain and the gut. So where does gravity come into all this? Well, I was thinking about this one day and thinking about roller coasters. And you know, when you're on a roller coaster and you're in free fall, almost every human has this reaction in their belly. Like, what's going on in your belly that you get these butterflies, right? And for some people, that's a really positive, almost fun feeling. For other people, particularly people with irritable bowel syndrome, when I ask them, do you like riding roller coasters? They're like, no way. I get that feeling all the time. I don't want that feeling. So why, when you're falling, do you get gut feelings? Not just on a roller coaster. Some people are so sensitive that being in an airplane causes it, or an elevator that moves too quickly, or in some cases, just thinking about falling causes those gut feelings. And then you realize it's not even just thinking about falling, it's thinking about something stressful causes gut feelings. What's going on? Well, when we ride a roller coaster, it's kind of like we're practicing our demise. I mean, we know we're not going to die because it's safe, but the body doesn't know that. We never evolved to fall 20 stories and survive. Your gut is telling you you're about to die. You're about to die. And it's a G-force accelerometer that's saying you are experiencing a gravitational challenge that is beyond what you're able to survive. And, you know, we never wanted to fall down. We want to stand up and stay up. So the gut, in a way, is your first line of defense that says you're falling. But sometimes it's not a physical fall. It's like a metaphorical fall. I'm literally falling down in life, and I have these feelings in my gut. And IBS psychologically is like a neurovisceral fall. You're falling down. And by the way, when gravity gets us, in some traditions, we end up in a gravity box called a grave, which is a word that shares the same etymology as gravity.
Yeah.
So evolutionarily, we're trying to stay out of the ground. And people who are constantly feeling gut feelings, now, sometimes it's an infection or there's an issue we can talk about in the gut itself, but sometimes it's the brain, like a ventriloquist, throwing its voice into the gut and saying, you are falling. And depression is as if you've fallen. You've hit the bottom. It's like gravity is too strong on you. You feel exhausted. You can't get out of bed. You're slumped over. You're looking at the ground. You have no energy. That's what it feels like if there's too much force on your body, like you're literally not made for this planet. You can imagine how people might suffer through that experience. And so now we're getting somewhere with the brain and the gut. And I'll stop there for a second because I can talk for another hour about serotonin and the microbiome, and maybe we'll talk about that too. But the paper that I wrote really breaks this all down and looks at not just the physicality of the gut, like in postural tachycardia syndrome or POTS, you mentioned, people get lightheaded, but their gut also collapses because they have stretchiness in the suspension systems, and then they get bacterial overgrowth. And it turns out bacteria are very important for serotonin production in the body, and serotonin is very important for gravity management in the body, mentally and physically. And if everything's thrown off, you can now see why Hippocrates said in 300 BC that all disease begins in the gut, is what he said.
Which
And
is
there's some truth
amazing.
to that. Yeah.
Yes, it's amazing. And you say that the molecular structure of serotonin evolved more than 600 million years ago. I love
Mm.
these stats because, again, it makes you appreciate just how intricate our bodies are, and how beautifully designed they are, but also how important it is for us to take care of them. And you talk about that we can boost our serotonin with stack 10. You have certain
Mm.
foods.
Hmm.
So tell us why these foods help
Yes,
because
that's
we
right.
need the serotonin.
Yeah. So stack 10 is a diet, but before I tell you the foods in it, just take a step back, just like you said. Serotonin, what is this? So it's a neurotransmitter, and most people think of it like word association as the happy chemical, maybe.
Yes.
And it is that. If you think about serotonin, when you have more serotonin in your brain, you feel happier in general. Now, there's a lot of things that determine your mood, but serotonin is part of it. When somebody takes psychedelics, they literally say they feel high. Like literally, high is up and down is low, depressed is low. They feel high because serotonin is exploding in their brain when they take LSD or psilocybin or some kind of psychedelic.
Hmm.
SSRIs, which are commonly used for depression, also increase serotonin, not like a psychedelic does, but it's a mood elevator, up, up. We look at to the heavens for inspiration, and down is often bad.
Yes.
I feel down in the dumps, right? I feel up, I feel good, I feel high. So serotonin, though, it turns out 95% of it is not in your brain. It's actually in your gut. And the gut microbiome determines how much and when you will create serotonin. And once you have serotonin in the gut, it jumps on platelets, which are these clotting factors that distribute it throughout your entire body. And then it goes to every corner of your body. And without serotonin, you and I would be flaccid sacks on the ground, unable to hold a conversation like a baby. A
Wow.
baby has very little circulating serotonin. It has not yet colonized its gut microbiome, and it literally is not able to prime itself, its pumps and tubes to get up and move. It has a lot of neurological but also physiological work to stand up. We co-evolve with the microbiome so that it can give us serotonin so that we can move around a gravitational world. That's what I believe and that I write about in the book and have published in other papers. And so that brings us to the diet because serotonin depends on tryptophan, which is an amino acid that we need to get from our diet. And tryptophan gets converted into serotonin in the lining of the gut with the help of the bacteria. And so stack 10 is my way of remembering to stack my diet with 10 foods. And it spells out STACKTEN. So S is salmon and seeds. T is turkey. So that's why, people often get sleepy, they talk about on Thanksgiving. And that's because melatonin, which is sleepy, hormone, neurohormone, comes from serotonin, which comes from tryptophan, which comes from turkey. Turkey. A is avocado. C is chicken and chickpeas. K is kidney beans. And then the 10 is T is tofu, E is eggs, and N is nuts. So those are some of the more common foods that are full of tryptophan. So I've gone on for a little while there. It's a long discussion, but I hope
No,
that's
I love
helpful.
it. And
Yeah.
my audience is going to love all of that because it's anything that's actionable too, where you say, okay,
Mm,
so now that I know this, and those foods are ones that we want to be having in our diet anyway for other reasons for our health, right? But
right.
knowing that they impact the serotonin, which I don't think many of us knew was so important for our body. And I've never really thought about it with the babies, but if you think about it too, you're right. They're not getting off the ground. They're crawling or they're lying there. So they're closer,
Mm-hmm.
right? The gravitational
Yeah,
pull is like that's their first whatever, however, until they walk, year or maybe
exactly.
10 months, depending on the kid. It's interesting too, because you said that some of us have different gravitational gravity tolerance.
Mm-hmm.
So, in terms of IBS or ulcerative colitis or Crohn's,
Mm-hmm.
you say for some of us at higher altitudes,
Yes.
you're going to be experiencing things differently than someone else, or even maybe even on the roller coaster.
Mm-hmm.
Or
Mm-hmm.
no, would the roller coaster be an example of that, or not so much? Because now
Yes
we're
and no.
talking to
Yes and no.
altitude.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So you're absolutely right. It comes back to what I said earlier about we're talking about our relationship to the planet. And that includes where you are latitudinally and altitudinally. And we often don't think about these things, but as we move up into higher atmospheres, higher in the atmosphere, our body changes a lot. And that is a gravitational effect. Gravity pulls the atmosphere like a blanket close to the ground, close to sea level where we evolved. And we didn't evolve in mountaintops. We got up there. But as we get higher and higher up, gravity's effect leads to a thinner and thinner atmosphere. And so it's a gravitational effect, which is why when people go on airplanes, very frequently they get something called jet belly, where their belly swells up and they get bloating. But also people with Crohn's disease or inflammatory bowel disease might get a flare up while they're in an airplane. And we don't know exactly why, but it looks like the microbiome also evolved at sea level. And those organisms too can get thrown off, not just in an airplane, not just in high altitude, but even in space, where we now have evidence that the gut microbiome and serotonin biology of astronauts changes in relationship to gravity. Those little critters also evolved like us at sea level. And so things have to modify and change as we progressively go up in altitude. And it can lead to irritable bowel syndrome. In the high altitude plateau in Tibet, for example, which is around 13,000 feet, there's a higher incidence of IBS, particularly people who travel there. They start getting stomach issues. They can get IBD flares. They can get twisted bowel, something called volvulus at high altitudes. These are just a few examples of how our relationship to the planet determines our physical health.
absolutely. I remember even just traveling to Colorado and getting dizzy.
Dizziness. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
right.
gravity intolerance,
That's
dizziness. Yeah.
gravity intolerance. I know. I was there for a conference years ago, and I was like,
Mm,
I got to go lie down. I had to go lie down.
exactly. Yeah. Lie
Right.
down. Yeah.
I probably needed more oxygen too, but
Well, that's part
okay.
of it. Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned mental gravity a couple times. You've sort of
Mm.
alluded to it. So you say that people with depression literally feel like they're being dragged down, and it's true. And I'm just curious, again, the mind-body connection and what strategies we can use based on what you're talking about for
Yeah.
health issues like anxiety or depression.
Definitely. So the idea behind this is there's something called graviception, which is the perception of gravity. And our bodies are constantly tracking gravity through the inner ear, through the muscles and bones and tendons and the nervous system. And all of those signals converge on a particular part of the brain, happens to be called the insula. And that's like a control dashboard for gravity management. And it affects physical gravity, but also this idea of mental gravity, which which is a term that this guy Lachlan Kent in Australia came up with. And he and I now are doing another podcast called The Gravity Doctors, by the way, that we're just
Oh,
about
good
to
for you.
launch.
Oh, good
Yeah,
for you. So you're going to be talking all about
all
this?
about this. So we're going to be called The Gravity Doctors. The first two episodes are about to launch. Probably by the time this comes out,
Oh,
it'll
good for
be
you.
up.
Okay, we'll check that out. And
Yeah.
he studies this as well,
So
but for
he
mental health?
designed this whole theory of mental gravity.
Okay,
And so this then gets to, all right, your practical questions. Well, what do we do about all this,
of
right?
course.
Well, for example, we use virtual reality. In the hospital, we use VR to simulate floating up above the ground, floating through the clouds. We have patients who are lying down in bed in pain, who are some of the most vulnerable people in the world, who are sick, and then we lie them down. They should be up. not just physically up, but mentally up. And we have shown that if we use virtual reality for upward elevating experiences, it can change the stress hormone levels in their body. It changes their white blood cell count, which is crazy to me. Their heart rate and their heart rate variability, which is the beat to beat variation in their heart. There's a direct relationship between mind and body. And VR is one way to do it. There's something called flotation therapy, where if you float in a salt water tank and they turn the lights out and warm the water, it feels like there's no gravity anymore. And when they check out the brains of people who are in these flotation therapies, you can see that it affects the brain in very positive ways.
Wow.
Sense of stress goes down, time goes down. It's been used for depression. I floated in the Dead Sea, and it's the same kind of, buoyant feeling. And then exercise is going to boost serotonin levels. Sunlight boosts serotonin levels. And we talked about diet already. So these are all anti-gravity treatments that everyone knows about anyway, exercise and strength training, deadlifts where you just sort of dangle from a bar. You don't have to do pull-ups, just hang from a bar. And there's evidence that can be very powerful for mental health and physical health. These are all non-pharmacological ways to boost serotonin, boost your gravity resilience, strengthen your body, and literally stand up to gravity.
That's so fascinating. And your first book was on VR. So just for those of us who, this is newer. I mean, I know the Apple store, I went in one day, they're like, do you
Yeah.
want to try on our new VR headset? And
Yeah.
I didn't have time that day, but I was curious about it. I have
Mhm.
curiosity, but I think most of us aren't very familiar with virtual reality and the applications that are going to be used for our health. I think it's
Mhm.
fascinating.
Yeah, so my laboratory studies the use of virtual reality, not for gaming or entertainment, but for actually helping people with chronic pain, anxiety, depression, addiction. We
Mhm.
have research funded by the National Institutes of Health, the NIH, right now using VR for irritable bowel syndrome, for
Wow.
inflammatory bowel disease, for chronic back pain. And so the idea is over the course of an 8-week treatment protocol, you surround yourself in these immersive worlds and you learn how to think about your body differently through these simulated worlds. We don't want people living in VR their whole life. We want
No.
them learning something about their life that they can then bring back into real reality. So we do cognitive behavioral therapy. We're now combining it with artificial intelligence and biosensors to
Wow.
look at your physiological data and change what you're seeing and hearing and feeling in the VR. And then there's a program that's pretty inexpensive. I have no relationship to the company called Trip VR, TRIPP VR. And if maybe you have kids or you yourself have one of these Meta Quest headsets, Meta is the most popular form of headset, you can go into the app library and download Trip. And it's a really amazing meditative world that you go into. And there's a part of it where you literally elevate your body above a lake. And it's just like shockingly effective. I've used it myself. I had shingles, unfortunately, a couple years ago post-COVID. And the most effective thing to get me through that was just VR and going through these meditative apps and Trip VR. So
Wow.
yeah,
And you did it
thanks.
at home
I
because
did
you
that at
had,
home. Yeah. Mhm.
wow. Are you excited about anything we should be like on the horizon that we should be aware of? It sounds like aligned with this, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the VR space, there's so much going on with advanced technologies. The Apple Vision Pro you mentioned, we need to see kind of cheaper versions of that to get more generally out there. We'll be seeing more with eyeglasses, being able to overlay, meditative experiences that make you feel like you're in a forest. Now, by the way, there's nothing wrong with actually going to a forest. Okay, like I
That's
like,
tends to be my
yeah,
bias. Yeah. Be in the
call that
real world if you
RR.
can.
That's real
Yeah.
reality,
Yeah.
right?
RR. I like RR.
But if you're stuck in a hospital,
Yes.
or you can't get out of the city, there's something called biophilia, which is this love of biology, love of green spaces. We have a natural, inborn physiological response to green natural spaces. And we've been able to show that we can simulate that with virtual reality. So if you can't get to the real thing, you can simulate it and get some of those physiological responses in your body. And in a way, there's an anti-gravity effect built into that.
It's all so fascinating. Is there anything I didn't ask you that you really want to make sure my audience takes away from this conversation?
I think we've really covered a lot of ground today. The book goes into even more detail. But, my hope is that we will see more doctors and more clinics taking this holistic biogravitational medicine approach to health. And next time you think about symptoms you're having, whether it's dizziness or pain, whether it's back pain, stomach pain, foot pain, swelling in the ankles, think about gravity for a second and your relationship to it, and what maybe you can do a little bit differently to change your relationship with gravity for the better. And you might be shocked to see how much of your symptoms are tied into a mismanagement of this fundamental force.
If it's okay, I want to close with reading something you wrote that I found
Yeah.
so poetic and significant in the book, and I loved it. And it kind of ties into what you're saying. You write, this surprising connection between our place on Earth, the microscopic life within us, the neurochemicals that shape our health, and the immune defenses that protect us, reveals a powerful truth. We are not separate from our environment, but shaped by it. Every breath, every shift in altitude, every unseen microbial exchange is part of an intricate dance between the body and world, something beautiful and profound. It is a reminder that we are not merely residents of our surroundings, we are woven into them down to the cellular and molecular levels.
Yeah.
It's so powerful. I love what you're doing. I'm excited for this to be sort of adopted more broadly, to see where you're going with it, where how everyone, how it kind of plays into it. And for us and for ladies, for everyone who's listening, the book, you can hold it up. I don't have a copy, Dr. Siegel, but the book
Yeah.
is Pull How
There it is.
Gravity. Perfect. I love the
Cool.
cover.
Yeah, this is the book.
Pull How,
Available wherever books are sold. And
yes.
I hope you guys enjoy it and learn some things from it. And at the back of the book, there's a resource guide full of exercises and activities and things you can do, practical take homes. So it's not just a bunch of theory, but there's some, things you can do to change your life, hopefully for the better.
Absolutely. And I really appreciated that in the book. And I want to go back to a lot of those sections. So all of this is very actionable, which I also appreciate. Where can people learn more about you, your new podcast?
Yeah, so I have a
Yeah.
website. It's my name, Brennan Spiegel, MD.com. So that's BRENNAN SPIEGEL MD.com. And there you can find my books, link to our new podcast, more information about my laboratory and the work I do here at Cedars-Sinai and at UCLA.
Thank you for your time today. It's been such a pleasure and an honor. And I'm excited for this book to get released out into the world and to see the reaction.
Well, thank you so much for your curiosity and interest and enthusiasm. It's been a great discussion.
Oh, thank you so much.